Hello Dr. King, colleagues and fellow YouTubers. Today I'm going to review and summarize this book, All This Stuff, Archiving the Artist, in the form of a Q&A self-interview. Who edited this book? Judy, Vaknin, Karyn, Stuckey, and Victoria Lane. How did this book come to be? This book came to be, well, it's kind of a long story, but in the 1960s, in response to a big increase of art libraries, young artists, archivists, and art librarians seeking collaborative help created this organization called the Art Library Society, also known as ARLIS. So into as far as the late 80s, different branches of ARLIS was established around the world. It grew so big that subsections were created, and one of those subsections was the Art Archives Committee. In 2007, under the direction of Judy Vaknin, the Art Archives Committee set up this one-day conference called the Archival Impulse, Artists and Archives, and it was held at the Tate Britain and received a lot of funding from the Arts Council of England. So yeah, it was a kind of a big deal. The conference was so successful that they had a follow-up conference in 2009 at the Tate Britain again called Archiving the Artist, which shares the name of this book. Subsequently, the Tate agreed to publish some of the essays produced by this conference on its website under the rubric Tate Papers. But since only a few were published and many more added overwhelmingly new thought and theory to the practice of art archiving, the Art Archives Committee of ARLIS decided to assemble a book of the subject of artists and archives that includes papers from the conferences, as well as new supplemental essays to give substance and balance. This assemblage created the book in question, All This Stuff, Archiving the Artist. Okay, so that kind of was a long story, but tell me, how is this book organized? Well, at the conferences, 3 aspects of archives were addressed: creation, curation, and consumption. The book follows this same train of thought. Organized as a conglomeration of a series of 12 essays, this book is subsplit into 3 sections depending on the author's role of those 3 aspects. The first section is artists, creation, the second archivists, curation, and the third art historians, consumption. So what are some important points to note in each of these 3 sections? Well, in the artist section of the book, I found Artists and Archives of Correspondence especially informative. This article was a series of letters 2 artists sent to each other trying to identify the reasons why so many artists feel so strongly about archives. The second main reason they state is that at some point in the artist's career, one asks herself, why add more to this already overburdened culture? Which begs the question, why preserve any of this stuff? Does this stuff have any meaning? And who gets to decide what it means? The latter 3 of these tough questions both artists and archivists have to decide in their work, and therefore are unconventionally but irrevocably connected. In stark contrast to the artist's essays, the archivist essays are less theoretical and thematic, but rather more pragmatic and concrete concepts. For example, Anna McNally's All This Stuff, Organizing Records of Creative Processes, is literally a general explanation of all these issues an archivist goes through in accepting, sorting through, and maybe even getting rid of an artist's stuff. Through this explanation, she shows that no matter how unbiased an archivist tries to be, their role as an archivist isn't just to preserve, but also to decide what gets to be kept and how it is processed, which in turn creates a significantly filtered view of the object in question. The takeaway from this explanation is that for the researcher to obtain true or mostly true hard data from archives, they must be aware that all archival data is coming to them in a mediated or filtered form. The last 2 essays of this book come from the researcher's perspective. Chapter 11's Witnessing the Archive, Art, Capitalism, and Memory by Sass Mays asserts that invention comes from pre-existing objects arranged in new ways, and this remains true for not only art, but for archivists as well. Archive fever has grown of late because of the recent shift from the analog to the digital in a capitalistic society. May's theme of how this digitization of archives changes the politicalization and fervor of archiving makes for not only the densest article of the book, but arguably the most relevant in conceptualizing today's best practices. Would you recommend this book to anyone else? Yes. Who would you recommend it to? Anyone in the 3 fields mentioned previously: artists, archivists, or art historians, but could also extend to anyone interested in the arts, conservation, museums, collections management, and humanities research. What kind of additional questions does this book generate? Does the digitization of archives change the politics and/or meaning of how and what we archive? In what other ways are artists and archivists similar? What new best practices are needed for physical archives to stay relevant? How does archiving living artists' work differ from archiving dead artists' work? How can we make archives more approachable? And that's my review of All This Stuff, Archiving the Artists. Please feel free to answer these questions or anything else you have in mind in the comments section below. Thanks and have a great day.